Hey, it's me, Rad Chad from Scare Package. I play Jeremy King in real life.
Hi, this is Zoe Graham. I'm Jessie from Scare Package, and you're listening
To the Graveyard Show. It's gonna be awesome.
Welcome to the Graveyard.
And welcome to another edition of the Graveyard Show podcast. I am your caretaker, and the graveyard is open. Happy October, everybody. I hope you've been able to enjoy this Halloween season, even though we have to do it in this new normal. Well, come on inside and take your minds off of things for a little while. As you heard at the top of the show, actor Jeremy King and actress Zoe Graham will be joining me in just a moment to discuss their film Scare Package. Now, I have to say how really cool it was that Jeremy did his intro as Chad. He did that totally on his own, and it really just made my day. I was not expecting that at all. So, Jeremy, that was awesome. Thank you. You're going to find out in a few minutes how cool Jeremy and Zoe are. They're just two great people who were very generous with their time, which I greatly appreciated. Well, they say that 3 is the magic number, and that's the case with this show because it's the third show in a row where I will have 2 guests. So maybe it's 2 that's the magic number after all. Before I continue, I do have to thank Priscilla Rios from Katrina Juan PR. This was not the podcast that I had planned for this month, but Priscilla reached out to me to see if I was interested, and of course I said yes. I guess you could say that she delivered me a scare package for Halloween. Okay, I'll leave the jokes to the professionals. I should know that by now anyway. But I did want to say thank you to Priscilla and her team for doing such a great job putting these interviews together. Speaking of contacting, if you want to get in contact with the show, there's only one way, and that's through email. I know, I see your eyes rolling out there. It's just how it is. Sorry, folks. The email address is gyspodcast@gmail.com. G as in grave, Y as in yard, S as in show, podcast. gyspodcast@gmail.com. I know email's kind of like the rotary phone, right? But since there's no social media for the program, that's the only way you can get in contact with me. And so far, it seems to be working quite well. Now, before I get to the interviews, there are a few things I need to tell you about the film. If you haven't seen Scare Package yet, it is still streaming on Shudder. You can watch the movie as a standalone, or you can catch it on The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs, where Joe Bob, Darcy, and the crew do what they always do, put together an awesome show for all of us to enjoy. Now, if you don't have Shudder, don't worry, because starting Tuesday, October 20th, Scare Package will be available on digital, VOD, and Blu-ray. And I can tell you right now that as a Blu-ray exclusive, you will get the Scare Package episode of The Last Drive-In included on the Blu-ray. So that's a pretty cool bonus feature to get. I'll get to the other bonus features later after the interviews. Now, the disclaimer. If you haven't seen Scare Package and you don't want to know anything about the film, you should turn back now and come back after you've seen the film. While we did our best not to ruin anything for those of you who haven't seen the film, there are obviously some things that we did need to discuss. There are a few surprises that we talk about and some moments from the film that we discussed. That just couldn't be helped. After all, it is an interview, and if I avoided everything about the movie, then it really wouldn't be an interview, right? So there'd be nothing to talk about. So again, I will repeat, if you have not seen the film and you don't want to know anything about the film, come back after you've seen the movie, okay? You have been warned. You have been warned. You have been warned. I don't want to get any angry emails from any of you out there because I gave something away in the film before you got to see it. All right, now with that, as you hear in the background, 2 new graves are being dug, which means my guests have arrived. First, Jeremy King, followed by Zoe Graham. By the way, when you're listening to the interviews, see if you can spot the common thread that Jeremy and Zoe discuss with me. Okay, it's time to get to work. Jeremy King is one of the stars of the film Scare Package, and it's his character of Chad, whose video store serves as the central location for the frame story of the film. You can also catch Jeremy in the new horror western film, The Pale Door, and I'm very happy and pleased to welcome Jeremy to the Graveyard. Jeremy, thanks for joining me here.
I think we should make it clear that you're using the term star very loosely.
I don't know about that. I mean,
I don't want to give anybody false hope before they see it, and and then they're all let down. They're like, this guy's not a star.
Well, you're probably number one on the call sheet, right? So there you go.
I think that might have been Joe Bob, but yeah, we'll say
it probably was. So let's just cut right to the chase. So how did you end up getting cast in the film?
I've actually worked with Aaron and Cameron, Paper Street Pictures, for a couple different projects now. And it was funny, we did a short film together. Aaron was a producer on another film back in 2003, and it was one of the first short films I ever did. It was a comedy, and I was playing a bicycle cop. And they actually called me like 8 or 9 years later when they were doing one of their first short films for Paper Street Pictures called The El Chupacabra. And so I flew out to Texas and worked with them on that. So we've kind of been working together ever since.
So for those that haven't seen Scare Package yet, what can you tell them about your character of Chad?
Chad is probably the most amazing person you're ever going to see on screen anywhere in the world. You're definitely going to want to check him out. That's the first thing I'd have to say. He is a know-it-all horror aficionado that runs Rad Chad's Horror Emporium. And very attractive.
He's a good-looking man,
and he has a very nice mustache. What more could you want?
Exactly.
Some people, including his own mother, would call him the full package. That's what I have to say. That's what I have to say about Chad.
I appreciate that. So you were in the frame story, and you were also a part of the final story entitled Horror Hypothesis.
Correct.
We just talked about working with Aaron Koontz previously. He wrote both of those pieces that you were in, as well as he created the idea for the film itself. So obviously with your previous work experience with Aaron and also working with him in these pieces for this film, did it really help kind of flesh everything out for you to work with someone who is so close to the material?
100%. And the thing I absolutely love about working with Aaron is he really lets you just get in there and play. We would do some takes that were pretty close to the script. I would joke around every day I came in. I'm like, there's a script for this? Like, why did you guys not tell me about that ahead of time? But if we had time, he would kind of let us do our own thing and, stay close to the story and all that stuff, but really just let us kind of have fun and explore the characters. And especially in like the wraparound segments with Byron and with Han, those guys, man, just made me laugh so hard throughout the whole thing. Like I literally had a hard time keeping a straight face while I was on camera with them. And then some of the scenes I watched just between the two of them, like I would stay on set and watch their stuff. And we almost ruined a few of their takes because we were laughing so hard behind the camera. So the whole time it was just such a fun atmosphere, and especially the final segment, Horror Hypothesis, getting to work with a legend like Joe Bob Briggs, and then also Dustin Rhodes, who's a Rustler Gold Dust. So
yeah,
the whole thing was just a huge, huge treat,
It sounds like it was a lot of fun to come to work every day.
I would literally do that every day for the rest of my life. I could just like hang out in the video store and shoot scenes and get blood thrown on me. I mean,
well, it's funny is because with there's one scene that Han and Byron, it's when Byron says to Han, do you know what the Goldie Hawn is? Now watching this, I'm dying watching this, and I'm thinking to myself, now was this in the script or was this ad-libbed? Do you know?
That was definitely thrown out there from Byron. And that was that. I think that was one of the ones where we did ruin the first take, just because when he threw it out there, we just all laughed so hard that I think they had to do it again. Like it was so insanely ridiculous that it was awesome.
It sounds like there are going to be a lot of outtakes that we'll eventually see from this movie.
Oh yeah, like I was trying to think through all the outtakes that there may be. Like you kind of forget about a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
But speaking of Zoe Graham, there was a scene where when Joe Bob is dying, and I decide that I'm going to go after the Devil's Lake Impaler, and there's this one moment where she grabs my shoulder, and I touch her hand, and I say, "No, this is my destiny." And it took us about 8 or 10 takes to get through that, just because I don't know what it was, but it was like the look that we were giving each other. Like neither of us could keep a straight face through any of that. Like, it was so ridiculous.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm sure at a certain point, Aaron's like, "Okay, come on, let's move on here. What are you doing?"
Well, speaking of Joe Bob, the death scene when he's like, "Come closer, come closer." I mean, it just cries out that there were multiple takes done of this, because I could just imagine the two of you doing that and one trying to bust up the other.
100%. Yeah, that was definitely one of the ones where I had trouble keeping a straight face, because he had gone and talked to Aaron, like even in the walking scene that we did, that he was calling me Brad and like throwing all this stuff out there. He had gone to Aaron and talked about all this stuff, but I didn't know any of it. So,
so that's great.
That's going on. He's like, "Oh, all right, Brad," and I'm just trying to. And then during the death scene, I think he changed up a few times what he said when I finally knelt down. So it was like one of those things, like you're trying to stay in character, you're trying to stay in the moment. Like I was supposed to be all upset, but like, right when they call cut, you like break up laughing, and then you gather yourself together for the next scene,
Yeah. Yeah. There was, I'm trying to find the quote that he said to you. Here it is. At one point he says, "You're like the personification of what the internet did to film criticism." And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like Joe Bob.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was definitely coming directly from Joe Bob. Yeah. I think he had talked to Aaron about that beforehand. He's like, "I'd really like to throw this in there."
I mean, it's such a blast, and you could tell. I mean, that I kind of miss the fun horror movies, even like the what you would consider like the serious, like the Friday the 13th and stuff. I mean, to some degree, right? But I mean, what I always loved about those movies and Nightmare on Elm Street and a lot of those was that even though these are horror movies and you have characters that are being killed in it, there's a sort of fun that you get when you watch these films. It's the fun of the chase, it's the fun of the scare, and I think a lot of horror movies kind of lost that once we kind of switched into the 21st century, and it seemed like a lot of it was just like kind of hardcore. It was like either you're into this really kind of crazy violent stuff, or it's kind of like really light stuff. And I think this film is one of those things you can tell that all of you were having fun, and it was just a real joy to work on every day. With Dustin Rhodes, I'm curious, did you guys have kind of time to talk in between takes, or did he kind of stay in character at all? Like how was that?
No, Dustin Rhodes was absolutely the nicest person I've probably ever met. Very laid back, very chill. Like a lot of times when you have people like Dustin Rhodes and Joe Bob and stuff on set, you don't really want to take up too much of their time. You don't really want, like there's some actors that'll like try to talk their heads off, right? And I always try to just give people their space, but he would actually come up and talk to you, and like he was telling us like great stories from his wrestling career, and Joe Bob was very much the same way. In between takes and in between filming, he would just sit around and like really be open and talkative and stuff like that. So that made it really nice. I'm glad Dustin Rhodes didn't try to stay in character, because he'd probably just be putting us in headlocks and throwing us around.
Yeah, exactly. Slamming you through
like,
tables.
"Look, man, I'm totally method here, and I'm gonna hit you a few times before we start this. I need to get angry." And which I've seen that before. I mean, I've been on films to where, you're in a fight scene with somebody, and like literally they'll spend 3 days in between takes, like not talking to you because they want to be,
Oh.
So I'm glad he wasn't like that, because that would have been,
Yeah, that would have been annoying.
I think overall, just everybody on this just had such a good time, all around.
Yeah, and it definitely shows. I mean, it really does. It's a fun movie, and I think a lot of the fans of this film and some of the critics out there that were just like, this is just a fun movie that takes you on this crazy kind of ride. I mean, I think Joe Bob called it on the last drive-in when he screened it on there. He called it. He likened it to building the Sistine Chapel, and he called it the most elaborate anthology movie ever made. So that's got to be pretty cool to hear him say that. I mean,
just the whole thing has been such a cool experience. I hadn't seen any of the wraparound or any of the other short films when we were filming this. So they took about 2 years to do all the different shorts, and then we basically created the wraparound in the final segment afterwards. And Aaron had described some of the different shorts to me as we were going, because they'll cut into them and out of them from the video store. So he was kind of describing to me what they were like. But man, I tell you, when I finally got to see it with an audience, it was such a special experience. Like the first time I saw it with an audience was in Sitges in Spain, which is one of the biggest horror festivals in the world. And then the second time was in Telluride at the horror show over there. And just the audiences were so great. And it's one of those things that, like, I've seen movies to where it just puts a smile on your face, and you walk around for like a week just like laughing about the different stupid little things that you saw. Like, it reminds me of when I saw Super Troopers when I was, like 10 years ago or however long that came out. Mm-hmm. Like that movie put a smile on my face for a week. And seeing this and the other directors did such a great job with their segments that, I mean, I was just so happy about it. The first time I saw it, I was just ecstatic.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I know when I was watching it here, it was late, and I was trying not to wake my wife up because I was watching the first segment of the Goo Guy, and boy, right. talk about a movie that starts off in one direction and goes into the next, and I'm like dying and laughing my ass off here. It was like, oh my God, this is awesome. And it's just, I think I said enjoyable and fun enough already. Right. So I have to come up with a different description of it. But I mean, I'm sure, yeah. I mean, when you're Stitches and you get that kind of reaction, it has to feel really good, especially as an actor who is working on something like you mentioned is over a course of 2 years. So, I think people forget this kind of stuff that, a lot of people that work on these projects, they start in 1 year, and then all of a sudden, a year or 2 years goes by, and then all of a sudden here it is. And to get that kind of critical reception and fan reception, to know that what you did and what you poured your heart into gets that kind of reaction and is going to sustain over time now, it has to be just an incredibly rewarding experience.
Oh, it's such a blessing. Like I said, I've experienced it with other films that I've seen. So when people look me up on Twitter or something and they send me a message of like, oh my gosh, I've never laughed so hard. Like we're doing a sleepover tonight, and all my friends are coming over to watch it, and it's just such a cool feeling to know that Aaron and Cameron and those guys were able to pull that off. And something like this, like, we had a blast filming it, but it also comes down to great editing. It comes down to sound, everything. There's so many little things that go into it that they really did an amazing job on. And we get a lot of credit as actors. But even when you do your best in some projects, if it's not edited well, or it's not, it definitely doesn't come out as good as this did. So it's been a pure joy from working on it to being able to experience it with some of the groups that we have too.
Yeah. Really quickly, as you, when you start the film and you know that it's a horror, it's an homage to horror, but it's also it's a comedic horror movie.
Sure.
Do you look at that and go, like, how do you approach doing that without getting too crazy with it? Or is it easier to get too crazy with it and have Aaron pull you back than not get to that point and then have him go, no, I need you to do more. I need you to do more.
It's really weird. Like when I do comedy, I sort of just fall into the character of it and fall into the scenes and just sort of stay open to the improv and the moment of it. I don't really think too much about like, I never go into a scene going like, oh, well, I got to try to do this, or I got to try to hit this joke, or, you know, it was more just, for me, doing comedy is such a joy that I just kind of drop into it, and whatever happens, happens. And I'm sure there was times that we got a little too ridiculous, and Aaron would kind of come in and be like, all right, that was really funny, but, let's try to stick a little more to the script.
Sure.
or when you're improvising, you throw something out there, and Aaron has such a absolute grasp on all the minute details of every single horror movie that's ever been out there, that I would throw something out there about Halloween or Friday the 13th, or, like, I don't even remember what it was, but he literally came up to me after a take and he's like, actually in Friday the 13th part 2, that didn't happen. That happened, later on.
Wow.
And this is actually what happened. I'm like, but I mean, that kind of detail. I mean, and if you look at, if you like break the film down, there's so many Easter eggs that he put in there just from his vast knowledge of different stuff. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Oh yeah. I caught that with, I mean, I know there's some that I'm gonna have to go back and try to catch, but I mean, one of the ones that glared out to me was early on in the film with the convertible, that when the top came down, it was the Freddy top from the original Nightmare. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Well,
yeah.
Even like the scene where we're in the lab and you see the GPS come up and the thing is blinking, that's actually from Alien.
Yes.
Every single room refers to like a different horror movie. Like the Devil's Lake Impaler, his shirt, his fraternity shirt says Delta Epsilon Alpha Eta, which spells death. I mean, just little details like that Aaron loves to throw in there.
That is awesome. Yeah, I was when the scanner and the blips are going, I'm like, oh my, this is right out of Aliens. I'm like, I was waiting for somebody to kind of go, they're in the room, they're in the room.
Yeah.
But I guess you can only take us so far without it, but it was so well done. I mean, did you have to, like, for that? Did you remember that scene, or did you have to go back and watch that just so you could kind of get the beats of what
it's one of
those
those things? Like, I grew up with all like the main horror movies, right? Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, but I'm not one of those people that can remember like small details about every single scene. So when he gave me the script, he also gave me a list of 10 or 12 new movies to go back and rewatch that were referencing each one of these little things that I'm talking about. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun though. Like when you work on something like that and you really get an appreciation for, I mean, Aaron really is like a true master of horror. And even in some of the other films he's done, there's so many deeper levels of every single scene that he does that, I mean, it would take a year to figure out every little nuance that he put in there for an exact reason.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm sure too, as an actor, I'm sure you've done projects too where you kind of wait to get something, and whether it's from a director or from the script or from maybe a department or something, and you just kind of like, well, you're not getting what you need. And I mean, to have that kind of prep come to you from the director, who also just happened to be the writer, but I'm sure too for you, that's just, it had to have just been not only gratifying to know, okay, great, he's not leaving me hanging on this and expecting me to kind of find what it is he wants. He's giving me what it is that this is referencing. And on top, and it has to just get the creativity going where you're just like, this is going to be great, because I know if this is what I'm getting in prep, when we get on set, it's going to be on.
Oh, 100%. I mean, 100%. Like every little reference that he made, he would like have me watch the film for that reference. And so like, but even when you're improvising now you're now you can expand that world, right? Because you know the references that he's alluding to, and then you also it's more recent in your mind of watching these films. So yeah, that was definitely a treat. I think working with Aaron in general, just having the level of friendship I had with him and having that level of camaraderie makes things nice too, because I know that at the end of the day, he's going to let me, if I go a little off the rails, he's going to let it go. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But we're going to have that. We have that sort of camaraderie where we know he knows I'm going to take things a little too far sometimes, and he'll have to bring me back. And I know I have the ability, because on a lot of films, it's such a tight shoot window and it's such a tight schedule that you don't. I mean, it's here's the script. Say your lines, make it your own. But then we're moving on.
Yeah. And
with this, it was so nice to be able to, take things off the rails sometimes. And a lot of that did make it into the final cut. And like I said, he's such a huge knowledge base about everything horror that if I said anything that was even remotely incorrect in referencing, a sequel or a trilogy or anything, he would say, well, no, actually this killer was a slasher. He wasn't this. I mean, it was unbelievable. So yeah, it was such a fun process.
So your character Chad has now really quickly become a fan favorite. There's already shirts online of Rad Chad's Horror Emporium. I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot more Chad memorabilia as the months and years go by over time. So that's got to make you feel pretty cool. What do you think it is that makes Chad so likable and so fan relatable?
I think everybody has that experience with that hometown video store, first of all. And I think the second part of that is he's a likable character, right? Like he is sort of, he knows a lot about horror, but he's also very, not very bright about everything that's going on around him. And I think one of the biggest things is that bleeds through onto the film is that we just had such a good time making it that you kind of get that essence when you're watching it. And I think that's what people really respond to. I mean, I know personally when I watch things, even when you're watching like SNL or something and the actors are like cracking up, they can't keep a straight face during the thing. It's like, it makes you laugh even more because you know that they're having such a good time doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. And again, just I have to throw kudos to Aaron and Cameron Burns. Great editing, great, they just did a wonderful job of putting this all together. So I mean for me, it's just been really touching to see this girl on Twitter, she goes under the handle Tales from the Stitch, made like a crochet doll of Rad Chad that she sent me.
Oh, nice.
I was like, dude, that is freaking awesome, And, people have done fan art and different things like that. My wife actually ordered me the Rad Chad or the Rad Chad's Horror Emporium shirt. So I actually did those for myself, which is great.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of times you get stuck in roles that maybe aren't as fun, that aren't responded to as well. So to have something like this, man, it's just been an absolute blast. Like, I'm just so thankful for it.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
It really has been.
Yeah.
It's been fun. It's a fun interaction too with like the Mutant Fam on Facebook and Twitter, and everybody's just been really supportive and just fun to interact with.
So you and Aaron worked on his newest project, his newest film that's I believe it's out now, called The Pale Door. It's a horror western. What can you tell us about that film?
I can tell you that I die.
Okay.
The Pale Door is sort of a little bit different tone. It's about an outlaw gang that basically tries to rob a train. They hear there's something valuable on the train, and it ends up being a young girl, and she takes them to this town, and it turns very bad very quickly. So it's sort of a mixture of old time Western and the horror feature of like witches and werewolves and
oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a really fun film. Funny story about that. I was actually supposed to be in the gang originally, and they sent me a script about a month before filming, and I'm reading through it, and I'm like, I don't see my name. Like, what? And I call Aaron and I go, hey man, was my character's name changed or? And he goes, Cameron didn't call you? I go, about what? He goes, well, we had to make some pretty drastic changes. No, but I mean, he did, again, the cast that he brought together for that film, when I watched it, I'm like, it totally made sense to me,
Yeah.
And seeing that, I'm like, I can see exactly what they did, so I have a lot of respect for, again,
Sure,
the vision that he has, and to be any part of it was again just a lot of fun.
Well, you guys certainly really work well together, and I know you guys are going to be doing a ton more projects together down the road.
Hope so. Yeah.
I know with COVID and everything, things are starting to slowly start up again in production. Do you have anything slated anytime soon or upcoming that we can keep a lookout for?
Sadly enough, I don't have anything solid yet. There's people I've been talking to about different projects, but this whole COVID thing has been so weird.
Yeah.
That it really threw everybody for a loop, and now it's sort of like this regrouping of even things that were supposed to be slated to be made. It's like they've been pushed back pretty far. So I can only hope. Like, I'm just starting to get back into auditioning over the last probably few weeks. So hopefully, there'll be some good things popping up soon. And I hope, I've talked to Aaron about, some projects that he's looking at in the future, and also some of the other directors. So we'll see, man. We'll see.
Well, we certainly wish you luck with all of your upcoming projects that you will be getting, because I know you will be getting. In the meantime, people can check you out on Shudder, watching Scare Package, or they can get the digital Blu-ray version as well. If people want to follow you, where can they go?
They can go to Twitter at the _ Jeremy King, or Instagram Jeremy_King45. Or they can look me up on Facebook at Jeremy King Actor.
Well, you heard from... Oh, I'm sorry.
I said I actually had to write all those down because I wasn't sure what my handles were on.
I'm sure after a while it's just kind of like, wait, which one? If it's anything like me...
What ridiculous name did I have to pick because everything else was taken?
Exactly.
_ // hashtag ?
Exactly. And then you go, what? Now I wonder why I never use half of the stuff that I signed into, because I don't even remember my own username.
Yeah, you can't even figure it out. It's like, I wrote you on Twitter. I'm like, I don't know what that is and where I am on that.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, blah, 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 blah. It's just too much.
There's like Snapchat and
oh, God.
Whatever, like TikTok and
yeah. It's insane. It's too much. It really is. It's overload.
It is getting a little out of hand.
Well, listen, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me inside the graveyard. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun, and I really do wish you all the best down the road. And I would really love to have you back on the program.
I'd love to be back.
Joining me now is Zoe Graham, who plays Jessie in the segment Horror Hypothesis. Zoe's previous acting credits include Support the Girls, Secret in Their Eyes, and Boyhood, to name a few. She's also quite a talented and accomplished artist as well, and it is my pleasure welcoming Zoe inside the graveyard. Zoe, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. What a nice intro.
Well, Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, you were great in the film, I have to say, and it's really great having you here. So thank you for taking the time to join me on the show. So for those that have not seen Scare Package yet, what can you tell them about your character Jessie in the film?
Sure. There's not much I can say without spoiling. There's some things about the character that you shift your perspective on her very quickly early on in the segment. But she's really doing her best to stay alive, and you will absolutely see that in a couple of different ways throughout the segment.
Yes, that is for certain. You kind of you get put through the tests on that in that film. That's for sure. So how did you end up getting the part in the film?
Yeah, so Aaron, the director Aaron, is I believe he's still Austin-based. I'm not sure now that the pandemic has scattered everyone. I'm not sure exactly where he would say that he's based, but I auditioned for him in Austin, which is where I am as well. And first of all, he was so wonderful to work with in an audition. There are some directors in auditions that like they don't give you any feedback in the room. They'll just be like, how about try it more this way, and you kind of were like guessing. And he was so personable and so kind. It was a group audition. Like he was doing one virgin, one jock, one any of the other characters, that the stoner. He was auditioning in groups of those. So getting to see the way that he would work with different actors in that audition and like laugh when something was funny, like he just like would respond in such a human way. I was already very game to work with him as soon as I auditioned with him. And then secondarily, in the audition, I'd gotten a chance to read through that segment, so the script for Horror Hypothesis, and I was like, how are you gonna do all this stuff in here? I don't want to give away what the things are, but there's a couple of very gory, incredible things that happen. And he was like, oh, we're doing it all practical effects. And I was like, I have to see this. I have to be there. I have to be part of this. I was so excited. I'm like a huge practical effects fan, not necessarily just in horror, but like across the board. I just think it's such a cool way to work and a really cool way to like get people more involved in the story. And that delivered tenfold, more than I could ever imagine. The last scene of the whole movie, I didn't know that was going to happen when I signed on for the movie, and it was quite a finish to the experience.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah,
it's pretty credible. So, I mean, let's talk about the audition process, because obviously, as an actress, you've gone on auditions, I'm sure many, many times. So, what is that process like when you get the call from your agent and they say, okay, there's a film or a TV show or commercial, whatever, they need you to come in and audition. How do you prepare for something like that when you're walking into a room of people who are watching you, and you're trying to deliver a great performance, but at the same time you're in a room with people staring at you with nothing that you know. So how do you go about doing that?
Well, I have sort of an interesting perspective on that, only because I'm 25 now, and I spent my college years in Baltimore, Maryland, and then I moved back to Austin, Texas. So the vast majority of my auditioning experience has been over tape. Like it's me and, my roommate or my boyfriend reading lines across from me on the camera. So sometimes that can be really, really helpful when it's, if it's somebody I really connect with and really trust and can be goofy with, and like, if the character needs to cry and the person I'm reading with like knows me and knows I can feel vulnerable, that's so much easier. In other ways, it's kind of nice to have that like nervous energy of going into a room and being like one person versus 6 people and an intern. That's sometimes really nice and can really like, put a sparkle on it and like make it's like the dumbest way to describe that, but just like can make you feel a little bit more alive.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, it's important, right? Because you're trying to pull out emotions, and you're trying to create something real from nothing. while people are staring at you. It's a little different than being on set and having blood splattered and people running and screaming, I'm sure, and being in that moment.
Totally.
So you'd mentioned Aaron Koontz, who's the writer director of your segment, as well as the frame story of the film, which is inside Rad Chad's Horror Emporium. So how important was that to be directed by the guy who not only wrote it, but created the idea for the film?
Sure. It was amazing. I mean, the attitude that Aaron presented in the audition ran through the entire filming process. That was just like, we're here to make a thing together. Things are going to evolve as we shoot. And he just seems so collaborative, or he is so collaborative. And, you know, at one point we were supposed to end with Jessie sort of doing a classic horror scream. And as we had shot, Jessie had just sort of become like more and more practical, like more and more the straight man of the segment, and, you know, not putting up with any of it.
Yeah.
And by the end, he was like, you know, I don't know if we need this. Like, I don't know if this is right. And I was like, I actually agree. But the fact that he was willing to change his ending that he wrote, so, you know, it was the right decision, I think. And the fact that he was willing to change it and be so flexible with his own work, that's like, to me, it's a special writer director who's able to do that.
Yeah, I would think too, as an actor, you're going in there and you don't want to be limited by someone who's like, nope, this is how it has to be. This is what I want. This is what you're going to do. I mean, I'm sure, look, we've all had jobs where it's like, this is what I want you to do. Just do it. And you go, okay, fine. But when you're trying to, in your position where you're actually trying to create something real and you're trying to connect with an audience, I'm sure it's amazing to have somebody who's like, oh, you know what? It doesn't work like this. Let's try it like that. Or we tried it like that. Now let's try it like this. So the creative process starts really kind of clicking. And in this way too, you feel like you're going in and you're also contributing while they're like everybody's contributing to it to make the film as good as it can possibly be. Totally. You got to work with Jeremy King and Han Tran, who are the two of the stars from the Frame story. So what was it like working with them?
They were great. It was funny to be on a set with people who were so comedically quick. I've just haven't had that much experience in like improv comedy and that kind of acting. So then getting to be around, especially Jeremy, who, you know, if Aaron says, okay, say a couple things, he can go on for 20 minutes. Like he'll never stop. It was very funny to be around people. I mean, everyone brings their own energy to a set, but Jeremy is he'll say, you know, at the end of a scene, he'll improv in 3 different ways in quick succession. And each one is like, you're whipping your head back and forth being like, I never expected that. And it's like sometimes hard to keep up, but he's very funny and very talented.
I'm sure too, it probably keeps you on your toes.
Totally. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to say too was that, getting back to Aaron, what I loved about, the scene that I loved was when you and the jock are in the room and the first cut is outside the room and you think one thing's happening, and then when you go inside it's something totally different. I thought it was a great spin on that. I mean, that must have just been fun to pull that little trick off. There's a couple of things about shooting that scene that are very funny to me in retrospect, is like, who else gets to be in a room, you know, being wild mic recorded, just be like, just make sex noises. and there's like 20 people standing outside and you're kind of like, I don't really, what kind of sex noises can I have some direction here? And trying to balance, you know, the gag of that scene with, you know, the joke that's happening there. Again, I'm like trying not to give it away. Sure. But, that was an experience that, again, when they were like, okay, go, I was like, what got me here? And then the other thing was that we weren't sure how the wound. I'm sort of just giving it away. Oh, that's okay, because I'm going to ask you about that anyway, so that's totally fine.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
then I'll full spoil it. The camera pulls into the room and they think I'm making sex noises with the other character who's the jock, but then it turns out that he's like bandaging a wound kind of tightly on my leg.
Yep.
And the place where the wound was on my leg, they were like, we're not really sure how to shoot this. Like, how can we make this look like sex?
Sure.
From
yeah.
the like silhouette, because it didn't totally make sense. And then, I was kind of listening to this conversation and all of these people talking about like how we were going to be positioned, and I remember like poking my head into the conversation and being like, well, how about oral sex?
Yeah. Yeah.
and them being like, we never thought of that, like that's perfect. I felt like such a mad scientist of that comedic moment, to be able to be like, you guys, we're missing something here.
Yeah.
It's not going to make sense unless it's
Yeah.
like this. So again, another moment where I was like, I never considered that I would be on a set being like, well, how about it's not genital to genital. I never thought those words would be coming out of my mouth.
That's funny.
But there we were.
And, well, again, the creative process, right? I mean, you felt
Totally.
like you could suggest that, and everyone was like, "Hey, wait a minute, never thought about that."
Again, and that like goes to, that's big props to Aaron, who on many other sets I would not be comfortable saying that, and
Yeah.
would be so worried about how that would come across, or like how if they would be like, why are you even having this conversation with us? And they were so immediately game.
That's awesome. Speaking of the leg wound, I mean, that looked great. How long did you sit in the makeup chair for that one?
Not long, which is wild. But the only way that happened was that it was mostly pre-made and then attached. So I imagine that the painting of the actual wound was extensive beforehand. But the person who I mainly worked with in the makeup special effects area was Tate Steinsack, and he had it entirely ready, attached it to my leg, and he was such a personable guy, as most people apparently on all horror crews and all horror fans are. He was like chatting with me about life and just getting to know me, and then I looked down and I like could have fainted. It was so realistic looking and so intense on my own body, and I like hadn't even thought about it. But yeah, it's a strange and visceral experience to see your own fake bone.
Yeah, that was impressive when the camera panned down, I guess we'd say, or tilted down.
Yeah,
And you see, I was like, wow, that was really good. You had retweeted Aaron Koontz on Twitter. He had posted a pic of you from the set inside the car, and it was captioned, quote, "Here is our final girl who was absolutely down with everything we threw at her," literally, unquote. So, of course, now I have to ask, how much blood and guts did they actually throw at you in this movie?
That is so funny. Yeah, and I that was such a strange and interesting day of shooting, because it was right after we had done I think it was maybe even at the end of an all-nighter, or we had come back for the afternoon, but everyone was kind of like wobbly from what we had just shot, and then we had this sort of what we thought of as the last scene, but we ended up shooting another, like an alternate ending.
Yep.
And I don't believe that this part made it into the final cut. I've seen it, but I'm hoping that it's on like DVD special features, where they I'm sitting in the car at the end of it, and they had someone get impaled right through the window, and they just continuously spurted blood into the car as a gag of like, the blood just doesn't stop coming.
Like Evil Dead,
and
like,
it was like
nonstop.
Totally. Which again, I was like so ready for. I was so hyped. I was like, this is gonna be so funny. It's gonna be so like such a crazy experience. And it was like blood in my mouth, blood in my ears. It was fully soaked. And that picture, I believe, is from that day.
Yeah, I'm remembering it now. So it had to have been, because it looked like you had gone through a shower of blood.
Yeah, and it was like that, and we were shooting, I think, late summer, early fall in Austin, Texas, so it was like hot, it was like humid, warm, wet blood on me, which again, like, once you submit to it, and you're just like, here I am in this car, gotta put in blood, it's kind of nice, it's like I'm sitting in a hot tub.
Yeah, It's work, but I mean, it could be worse, right?
Absolutely. It could be boring.
Yeah, exactly.
And nothing on this set was boring, certainly.
I mean, that's like weeks later, you're like, oh, there's some dried blood over here, and oh, there we go, get that out.
My shower was pretty disgusting afterward.
Oh, God. Well, speaking of Austin, you've shot a few films there now. I believe you shot Boyhood there as well. It seems to be a hub now for films.
Yeah, and I would love for it to become even more of a hub for films. I mean, there's, speaking of Boyhood, the Austin Film Society, which was founded by Linklater, it has given so many things to indie filmmakers in Austin. And like, you know, I haven't directed or written for an Austin film, but getting to work on those projects and then hearing about how they're supported by various Austin communities is really cool.
Yeah, it's great down there. I mean, and you have a lot of people from LA that have moved out there, so it's not surprising to me that the film industry is sprouting up there more and more. It really wouldn't surprise me in another 10 years if it's a really major hub. It seems like, you know, a lot's going on there now.
I hope so. I was born and raised here, so I would love to get to keep calling it my home.
Yeah. No, that would be great. So you wrapped the film. The film premiered at the Stiges Film Festival in Spain back in October of 2019, before our world changed. It started to gain traction. Were you keeping up with how the film was starting to get popular, more and more popular through word of mouth? And when did you hear that Shudder had picked it up?
I somewhat was. Now that we're all, you know, on lockdown and pandemic and wearing masks and all of that stuff, I've kind of like stepped back from social media a little bit, just because if I didn't, I would be on it 24/7 and just like doom scrolling.
Yeah.
But so I haven't, you know, I'm not on my top game, except for when Aaron tags me in a cute picture where he's like singing my very praises in a very sweet way. Then I'm gonna like step back into Twitter and retweet it, like you were talking about. But otherwise, yeah, I've been talking about Shudder today, and as somebody who's not, I'm kind of a big baby when it comes to horror movies, and like can't watch a ton of them. But I think it's like the coolest concept, and I think it's awesome that it came out during the pandemic so that people have that as a resource of like media and connection and entertainment. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's definitely given a lot of opportunity for independent films and shows and stuff to be shown on there, which is nice.
Totally.
So speaking of the pandemic, how have you been coping and doing during the shutdown? How have you been trying to make up for not being on a set during these last 8 months?
Sure. I've been lucky enough to kind of join a different side of the film community, where I've been doing a lot of different trainings in things like intimacy coordination, if you've heard of that before.
Oh, yeah, I do, yes.
Yeah, so that's something that I'm really interested in general. I feel like, you know, I've been lucky enough to not have had a ton of bad experiences. Sure. Like, this isn't, you know, I don't have an origin story of being really interested in this, but I've heard enough stories from my friends who work in the film industry that like, it just like is a small thing that happened on the set that felt really bad. So I'm working on this new thing called set advocacy. Okay. I'm at setadvocate.com. Okay. And I'm studying to work on film sets as someone who would be brought in with first-time actors or with child actors or anything like that, even if you're just working with sensitive subject material, as someone who's going to like check in on everyone who's working on the set and make sure everything's okay. Sure.
Now, for those that are hearing about this for the very first time, can you please explain what an intimacy coordinator does?
Intimacy coordination, if you hire an intimacy coordinator on set, it's usually if there's a scene of sexuality, but also running towards assault, sexual assault, things like that. It's somebody who's going to help choreograph those scenes and make sure that everyone feels taken care of, because oftentimes when people do a scene like that, they're sort of left to their own devices, you know? Someone will say like, well, just do what feels natural. And that's really the only time when we're told that as actors, like do what feels like well, then I'm just sort of kissing this person like how I kiss my boyfriend. Like, I'm not kissing this person how this character would kiss this other character. So it's someone who really acts as like, it's the equivalent of like a fight choreographer, but for scenes that involve sexuality.
Well, I saw on your website, you are a really excellent artist. You do great illustrations.
Thank you.
Do cut paper. You've done stop motion. I mean, stop motion is something I don't think of your generation doing. It seems like something from like my days back in the old crank radios and crank film cameras. And it's really, I mean, you're so artistic. So how did you know that you were artistic like this?
I think I got really lucky to be raised in a family where, both of my parents worked, had their own advertising business when I was little and were self-employed, and then worked at other advertising companies. And my dad's been working in, freelance videography since I was really little. So it was always sort of available to me as a lifestyle of like, you don't really have to be one thing. You can kind of just do what you want to do, and people think that's cool. Like, that's not a downside. That's such a cool thing to be able to connect with people in lots of different ways. And since both of my parents did work freelance, I ended up in a lot of summer camps, like, we can't really have you at our office all summer, so we're going to put you over here. And I got to do tons of cool stuff. It was such a cool gift to my childhood to be in horseback riding camp one week, and then filmmaking for kids camp the next week. It was really super great.
Well, it's fantastic stuff here. I mean, how long did it take you to do that? You have on your website 3 stop motions. They're like 30 seconds to like 45. How long did it take to make each one of those?
I think that perhaps the longest is maybe the Nick Lowe one, set to I Read a Lot, that song by Nick Lowe. I couldn't even tell you. It's one of those things. I made all of those when I was in school, and it was one of those things where it's like, I have no idea, because I was in a dark cave for weeks. Who knows? Yeah.
Time just kind of flies by.
Yeah, and I think that is really where like my love of podcasts really started, was doing stop motion. I would be sitting by myself in a dark room, moving tiny pieces of paper a fraction of an inch, and just be like mainlining podcasts.
Well, you do call yourself a podcast recommender on your website, so
I sure do.
What podcasts are you recommending?
One that I will always recommend is Heavyweight. I think that's a fantastic podcast, and I can't wait till they're back. But I like a lot of different things. I love Dear Prudence. I think that's very calming to listen to an advice show. But I'm considering putting up a full list of all of my podcast recommendations on the website. So maybe I'll do that.
Excellent. Well, I hope I'm on that list.
I'll add you. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. No pressure here.
I mean, I'll go back and we'll see. You might see your name on that list.
Hey, you know what? I would appreciate it. That'd be great. So we're in COVID Halloween season. You have any plans during this time?
We don't. My boyfriend and I were, talking about, like, we lived in a neighborhood where there were like 2 trick-or-treaters last year. So it's not even like we can kind of receive cute trick-or-treaters. It's like we'd really have to go out and look for it.
Yeah.
And we're on pretty strict lockdown here. So I don't think we'll be doing anything this year, but we have a fantasy that, because we've been watching all of the Batman movies in succession.
Wow.
And I'd never seen like older, like Adam West Batman before. So we have a fantasy that I would dress up as Adam West Batman and he would dress up as Robin. So we're saving that for next year.
Oh wow! So what did you think of that when you were watching those the old Batman shows?
Thrilling.
It's very different.
It is very different and funny in a way that, like, I think comedy is kind of like turning on a big wheel back to that, being in the Batcave with all of the things labeled. I think that's kind of like where comedy's heading right now. So I was really intrigued by that, and it's so funny to see just the like I felt like I knew the paces of a Batman movie, but the ones that I kind of grew up with, and they're so different in older ones, like so different. Yeah, I'd never seen the Tim Burton Batman movies either, and those were delightful.
Oh God, I stood in line the night before before Batman came out.
That's awesome.
In the theaters,
I wish I
did the midnight.
That's awesome.
It wasn't midnight. They weren't. I don't think they were doing midnight screenings at that point. It was like I think it was like a 9 or 10 p.m. Night before that came out. Oh God, that was such a huge. That I think people forget how big that opening for that movie was.
Totally. Yeah.
It's just like, man. Yeah, no, those are great. It's so funny because the Adam West Batman movie that they did, there used to be on network back in the Stone Ages, channel ABC, which I think is channel 7 most places, but they used to do the 4:30 movie every day. And that movie used to be on all the time. And,
That's so awesome.
As a kid, you just watch that. And those were so much fun. They really were.
I really loved that sort of like final fight sequence where they pulled out all the like word balloons on screen. I thought that was the coolest thing. I want that back.
It's so funny when you go back and you watch the different eras of movies and TV and how things were and how they changed over time. And sometimes you look back at some of the old stuff and you go, man, I wish we were still doing that.
Totally.
Well, listen, Zoe, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to join me on the show. If people want to find you online, where can they go to follow you?
Yeah, they're welcome to follow me on Instagram at Zoe Graham, or check out zoeigraham.com for artwork, or setadvocate.com for that kind of thing.
She's Zoe Graham. She's in Scare Package. She plays Jessie, and you gotta see the movie to find out what exactly happens. Zoe, thank you so much for joining me inside the graveyard. I would love to have you back on sometime down the road.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
And as I put these interviews to rest, I really want to say what two really nice and genuine people Jeremy and Zoe are. It was a real pleasure having them on the program, and I really do look forward to having them back again in the future. By the way, did you catch the common thread in their interviews? Well, it would be Aaron Koontz, of course, but not just because Jeremy and Zoe both worked with him, but because they talked about how collaborative Aaron was with both actors. And as you heard, it really does make a difference in the creative process. That's something for any of you young filmmakers out there to keep in mind as you move forward in your career. Now, I do have to make a correction. A few times in the interviews, I said that Aaron Koontz was the creator of the film, but he was actually the co-creator of the film along with Cameron Burns. So my apologies to Cameron for that mistake. Hopefully Cameron forgives me and doesn't have the Devil's Lake Impaler pay me a visit here in the graveyard. That would not be good for me. So, as a reminder, Scare Package will be available on digital, VOD, and Blu-ray on Tuesday, October 20th. As I mentioned at the top of the program, there is the Blu-ray exclusive you'll get, which is the Scare Package episode of The Last Drive-In. But now I'm going to tell you some of the other features you will get as well on home video. You're going to get the bonus segment, Locker Room Z. You're going to get, Rad Chad's Rad Ad, commentary from the co-creators, Aaron Koontz and Cameron Burns. Blooper reel. Jeremy and I just talked about that in our interview. So there will be a blooper reel included on digital and Blu-ray. And the original not as good ending. So I'm wondering if that's what Zoe was referencing in our interview a little while ago. So there you have it. Scare Package available on October 20th on digital, VOD, and Blu-ray. And as I begin to close down the graveyard, I quickly wanted to talk about what's coming up next. Now, normally I upload a new podcast every few weeks, but since this is October, I really wanted to get my next show up before Halloween. So that's what I'm planning right now. I don't want to jinx who my next guest is, but if all works out as it should, I'm planning on having my next podcast uploaded the week of Halloween. But if it's not there, if you don't see it there, then things unfortunately didn't work out, and in which case I will then see you in November. But right now, the plan is the week of Halloween, I will have a new podcast uploaded with my next guest, and you will want to join me for that one, I can assure you. In the meantime, if you'd like to reach out to the program, you can do so by email, as I mentioned earlier, gyspodcast@gmail.com. gyspodcast@gmail.com. The Graveyard Show podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Prime Music, and everywhere podcasts exist. The show is also available on YouTube. Just search for The Graveyard Show Podcast. And if you know anyone who's a fan of horror, please invite them to enter the graveyard. New listeners and friends are always welcome. In the meantime, my friends, stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. And as you exit the graveyard, I would like to remind you to please lock the gate behind you. We wouldn't want anyone to get out. Until next time.